This week on the show, Luminosity win Pro League, Tempo Storm qualify for Pro League, and two Brazilian teams move to North America. We've got a Brazil-heavy show. I'm Jack Westerman, joined by Corey Megaman Gomet, and you're watching one of the last ever episodes of PopFlash. Our first story this week is the ESL Pro League Season 3 LAN Finals, which took place here in London, England, over the weekend, the 14th and 15th of May. So, Corey, pretty big tournament. Over the course of the season, we saw $550,000 paid out, and of course, Luminosity took the lion's share. They walked home as winners with $200K to their names. So, as we get Group A up on screen, this was the group with Astralis, Optic Gaming, G2, and Luminosity. And a little upset straight off the bat there in the top left corner because Optic Gaming beat Astralis 16-7. Corey, what's wrong with time and space?
I mean, look, the biggest part about this right here is Astralis, for some reason, continue to struggle. They've been in kind of relatively poor form lately. They haven't been putting up the performances that we're used to seeing them do. Optic Gaming, though, they seemed extremely or at least extremely on form for this. Mixwell stepping up in a big way during that matchup, getting a ton of entry frags over towards the B-bomb site. Map was Inferno. And actually, the biggest storyline of this was the fact that Optic started on the terrorist side of Inferno, ended up winning 9-6 in the half, and then only dropped one round into the CT side, which was a massive, massive victory. Mixwell was doing great. Nafly was actually the kingpin of this one. He ended up something like 23-6 over the course of this matchup. Just a massive, massive performance from him. Mixwell, he was the top-rated player for him with 1.02 player rating, which isn't like an all-star performance, but it's a very solid performance. And that really kind of, between those two players just playing so solidly throughout this, that they were able to take this big win. And I've always said kind of before, and I think I said it last week as well, that Nafly is kind of my dark horse on Optic, where he can step up and take over games, kind of like how you see a Shox take over games, or you see a Device take over games. This time around, it was Nafly who stepped up in a big way for Optic.
Absolutely. Do you feel like, well, obviously after Optic got that win, they went to the upper bracket finals, so they had essentially 3 more maps to try and, well, almost 4 more maps. It's the best of 3 in the second place decider. They had 4 more maps to try and qualify from this group, and yet they just couldn't do it. They lost to G2 in that upper bracket, that face-off in the upper bracket, 16-7, and then they lost to Luminosity 2-0 in the second place decider. Surely that's a chance gone begging for the Canadians.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were chomping at the bit. They had an opportunity here to at least move out of groups. However, I mean, losing to the 2 teams that ended up in the grand finals of this, in what was probably one of the best of 5s that we've ever seen in Counter-Strike history so far. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing to be ashamed of, to be honest with you. I mean, they lost to G2 16-7 in the upper finals. They lost 2-0 to Luminosity. Both of those 2 teams ended up meeting in the grand finals. So, I mean, yeah, they had the opportunity there, but losing to the 2 teams that ultimately made it all the way through this tournament, it's tough to say it. I mean, we're going to talk more about this later on, but G2, what a hell of a performance throughout Pro League LAN finals.
Absolutely. We are going to talk about G2 and Luminosity a little bit later because what a final. So in the meantime, let's take a look at Group B. Now, this was Ninjas in Pyjamas, Liquid, Cloud9, and Fnatic. And Corey, I hate to bring it up, I hate to rub it in, but not so great for the Americans once again. Beginning in the top left, that NiP versus Liquid game. 22-18, and Liquid really should have won this, I think it's fair to say.
At one point during this matchup, Liquid was actually up 14-2. NiP brings it back. They go into overtime. Liquid actually gets up to 18. They're on map point at that point. 19 is the magic number in the first overtime. And then NiP just runs the gambit in OT, just brings it all the way back, and finishes it out 22-18. And this is going to go down as one of the biggest chokes that I've seen as far as following the scene over the past year, maybe 2 years, that we've actually come across. And it was really sad to see, being like, all right, man, Liquid, like, they're destroying NiP that just won DreamHack Malmö. Like, this NiP team comes in here as one of the favorites to run the gambit and make it all the way to the LAN finals for this one. But Liquid puts up this great performance, and then boom, it's just a slap in the face at the end of the day.
Yeah, boom, absolutely. How worried? I know we did talk about this last week, but how worried should we be for Liquid? Because I was on site in London and we did some interviews for ESEA this weekend. I asked Adren on camera what he thought the issues were. It didn't really feel like he had a solid answer. It was just kind of mental block. I talked to Hiko privately. He didn't have a solid answer either. It doesn't seem like they know how to get over this hump.
Well, two things come to mind. The first thing is that they just don't really have a tactical prowess that you would have seen some of these other teams with, like their extremely skilled in-game leaders and things like that. Ninjas in Pajamas comes to mind with Threat, their coach, and their IGL. However, it was just announced today that the former Tempo Storm coach, Peacemaker, has actually been signed to Liquid to coach them now. So hopefully we're going to see a return to a tactical side for the Liquid squad, and hopefully that'll allow them to start closing out these matches, because in this match that they played, they were up 14-2, and it was 14-2. They were on their terrorist side at that point.
Yeah.
So that was where the struggle was. I mean, it came down to not being able to close out T-side rounds, not being able to close out the match, and that's where they need to have that solid tactical base. They need to have that in-game leader that's going to be able to say, all right, we need to get this done. Have the go-to, the push-button strategy that's just like, if we hammer this home, we're going to be able to at least grind out 1 or 2 rounds to close out the match. And hopefully Peacemaker brings that to the table for him, because he's done great things for Tempo Storm that we've seen. And so hopefully they're going to be on the upswing after this is all said and done, because they did go on, and of course we're going to talk about this in a minute, but they did go on to beat Cloud9 2-0 in the elimination match and at least make it to the second place decider BO3 against Fnatic.
So just very quickly, Corey, before we leave this group, talking about Liquid and Cloud9, Liquid feel they have a claim to be the best in North America right now of the North American teams. Obviously, we're not including the Brazilians who've come in and invaded the joint. Cloud9 still having those struggles. Do you feel like Liquid, even with their offensive struggles and their choking tendencies, they're the best American team in North America right now?
Yeah, I would put them up there as the top pure-blooded North American team on the board right now. I definitely think that they've proven that against Cloud9. Now, granted, again, this is a young Cloud9 that we're seeing here with the debut of a new in-game leader. Stewie's still relatively new to the roster. So they're also going to hopefully start getting their tactical side together and start being able to put up bigger terrorist side halves against some of these teams. So I think that it's actually going to be interesting to see, because we might actually see more of like a competition between the top 2 teams in the North American division, because we've obviously seen CLG slide off. They've kind of, they're not even in the top 10 rankings anymore.
Yeah.
This, that, and the other. So we've seen a decline in CLG. Hopefully we'll see an upswing for Cloud9 and Liquid as these new rosters, these new coaches and everything like that start to get acclimated into the system, and could start to at least instill some of their wisdom onto these teams and start to bring them back up as to be more of a tactical approach to these teams.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed for them. And very quickly, Corey, before we leave this topic, let's take a look at the bracket stage. So, after the groups played out, we had Luminosity versus NiP, that match which Luminosity won 2-1, and Fnatic versus G2, which I think to some people surprised, G2 won 2-1 as well. And then, of course, the grand final on the right, which was, as you alluded to earlier, a hell of a match, best of 5, and Luminosity took it in overtime on the 5th map. First of all, I don't think anybody expected G2 to play this well. What do you put that down to?
Shox and Scream. I mean, Scream plus 41 kill to death ratio, 1.16 player rating, 6th overall in the tournament, obviously number 1 in headshots, 64% headshot. That's ridiculous. And then Shoxy coming back in here, and it's like the return of Shox. This is what we saw, early last year when he was having those dominant performances, and that was when, they were doing such great things on Titan, when he was having these absolutely all-star performances round in and round out. I mean, one that comes to mind was, I believe it was in this grand final on Dust 2. It was Luminosity at map point. It was like 15-10 or something like that. Comes down to a 1v3 Shox, and he ends up clutching it to at least extend that map just a little while longer. They ultimately ended up folding at the end of that map. But, it's just one of those things where it's like a normal player should not be able to win that round, or will never win that round. But it's Shox, and he does. So it's just one of those things where it's like, it's so great to see these guys kind of returning to form, and I really hope that it carries over into the next couple of tournaments.
Absolutely. Can't keep a good headshot machine down, as the famous saying goes.
They talk about his one taps.
They do indeed.
Well, you saw the one
so.
highlight. I mean, it rated the top of the Reddit page where it was like that snap flick shot that he just one tapped somebody in CT spawn on Dust 2. It was just like, all right, there's Scream. Okay, that's something, it's for any other player to hit that shot, you're going, holy crap, that's a ridiculous shot. But it's like, no, it's Scream. Hey.
However, I mean, I feel like it has to be said at the same time, Corey, Luminosity are known for playing beautiful Counter-Strike, but didn't look so beautiful in the grand final either.
They definitely struggled a little bit in that grand final, but the big thing is they're just so good at. This is one of the things, and I talked about this when I was casting the ESEA North American Premier LAN with Tempo Storm in it. Is even when they get down, they're just so good at grinding out rounds. So good at sure they might be down, but they're not out. Look at the major when they played against Liquid and they faced down 15 match points in that series, and they took the series 2-0. That's just a testament to these guys and their prowess and the fact that it's like, okay, we're down, but we're never out of this. And you can never count Luminosity out in a series like that.
Our second story this week is the ESEA Season 21 Premier LAN Finals, which took place in Burbank, California on, well, just one day, Sunday, May 15th, over the weekend. Now, this is the Premier LAN Finals, so the winner automatically gets a spot in Season 4 of ESL's Pro League, while second place would qualify to play off against one of the lower-ranking existing Pro League teams in a kind of promotion game to see who gets promoted, who gets relegated. So, as we get the LAN Finals bracket up on the screen, we can see Tempo Storm had a pretty good LAN. Swept straight through, did not lose a map. They played against Vault GG, followed by Zapug Gods, and Zapug Gods faced Team Caliber in their first game. Corey, you were here at this LAN, you were on site. Did it feel like this was Tempo Storm's to lose?
Absolutely. They came in here undefeated throughout the season. And I actually had somebody let me know that I believe that for the last 4 seasons in ESEA, Tempo Storm or their previous iterations of this roster have actually been undefeated through head-to-head play. The only map that they lost was last season because they forfeit a match because I believe that it was when Taco and FNX had first got picked up by Luminosity, but they still had to play out the season under Tempo Storm.
Right.
Or Games Academy as it was then, and they were actually overseas competing with Luminosity, and they decided to say, no, we're not going to worry about this too much, and then they eventually actually played the ESEA main grand finals while they were overseas, so it was pretty interesting to see. So their only loss that they've had, at least in the last 2 seasons, was on a forfeit, so it wasn't actually a head-to-head, so they're actually undefeated throughout 2 seasons now, which is a huge testament to them. But coming into this, they were obviously the heavy favorites. There was a lot of questions surrounding some of these other teams, though, and that's one of the things that I'd like to talk about as we go through this, because Tempo Storm actually did get tested in this best of 3 against Vault GG on the first map. They played them on Train, and that's not actually a map that we really see Tempo Storm play all that much, but they won it 16-13, so it was a really close map. And they actually had to fight from being down a pretty solid amount. I think at one point they came back from 13 to 6, I think it was, and they actually fought all the way back and ended up winning 10 straight rounds and closing out the match. And that's why, I attest that to the fact that the Brazilians are just so good at grinding out rounds, even when they're down. Second map was a little bit more one-sided. It went on to Cobblestone, a map that is obviously known for Brazilian power, and they ended up beating Vault GG 16-1 on that map. So that was a really big win for them, and then they moved on to the grand finals. On the other side, you've got Team Caliber and Zapug Gods. Now, there's 2 players that are on these 2 teams that have a little bit of clout behind them that needed to be answered coming into this LAN. The first was for Team Caliber, a player named Breeze, which had a lot of suspicion surrounding him that he might not necessarily be a legit player. And then adversely on Zapug Gods, there was a player, CJ the King, who is like this guy who just rolls through ESEA pugs. This is why they're called Zapug Gods, is because these guys just have ridiculous stats when it comes to playing a puggy style of CS. They can go into an ESEA pug and just dominate. These guys have 18, 19, 20 RWS throughout the month. Just completely just go in there and decimate people. And a lot of the questions were answered at this LAN tournament. The first being Breeze. This guy is nuts. He top fragged all 3 of the maps for Team Caliber through this best of 3. He actually, even though they lost 2 of the maps, I'm pretty sure he top fragged in the server in all 3 of the maps as well. The guy was absolutely insane. And the thing is Team Caliber, this is a new acquisition for him. Used to be Obey Alliance, now it's Team Caliber. And honestly, if they didn't throw money at Breeze, I expect him to get picked up by a bigger organization, just because talent-wise, guy was bringing the noise at this LAN. He was absolutely phenomenal. It was great to see. I had my own suspicions going into this, but I wanted it to err on the side of him being a dominant player and putting everything to bed. CJ the King had a rough start in the first map, but that was the one that Team Caliber won. It was Mirage. Team Caliber ended up winning that like 16-3. They started on T side. It was up like 13-3, and then they closed it out in the second half. So it was a big, big performance for them on map number 1. CJ didn't have a very good performance in that, but neither did the rest of his team. I think it was actually Marv that top fragged for the Pug Gods, putting up something like 16, 17 kills over the duration of that, which still isn't even, it's a decent performance, but it's not a great performance. Going on to the next 2 maps where they played Cash, which seems to be a home map for the Pug Gods. I mean, if you're playing a Puggy style, what better map than playing Cash, right? And CJ started to come alive in this. And then throughout the remainder of this tournament, CJ was a very solid player for ZPG. So I think that answered a lot of questions as well surrounding him. Can he do it on LAN the way that he does it online? And I think he did a relatively decent job for him. Then moving into the finals, of course, they play against Tempo Storm. So they go through the veto and everything like that. And again, what's the map that's good for pugging? Cash. So they go back to that. They had success on it before against Team Caliber. And they actually played Tempo Storm extremely close. It was 16-14. Tempo Storm was able to take that one. And again, it was by means of a comeback. Tempo Storm was actually down something like 14-8 on this map, and they actually grinded it all the way back and won it 16-14. So a testament again to Brazilians being able to, down but not out.
Absolutely.
And then what map did Tempo Storm smash Vault on? It was Cobblestone. So then they get a Cobblestone for map number 2, and Tempo Storm ends up beating them like 16-3.
Right.
Which was just a really big performance. Tempo Storm, they're going to be up there in Pro League, man. And this is one of the teams that's really, really scary, because if you look back at DreamHack Austin, we had the All-Brazilian final. There was no Liquid. There was no Cloud9 to speak of, because Cloud9 got beat by Tempo Storm 2-1. Liquid got beat 2-0 by Luminosity, and then the 2 Brazilian teams faced off. It was 16-9, 16-9, both maps to Luminosity, but Tempo Storm showed that, hey, man, we're here. We can hang. We're going to be a threat going into Pro League, and this is one of the times that you see one of these teams from Premier move up, and they're going to do some serious damage going through Pro League. I expect to see them at Season 4 LAN Finals.
So in that case, last question before we wrap this up. Tempo Storm have got that guaranteed spot in Pro League. The Pug Gods, not so certain. They do have to play one more game to determine whether they'll move up or not. Do you like their odds?
I do. I actually do favor their odds in this one. Just strictly based off of the fact that I believe the team that they're playing is K-Kona. And I believe K-Kona only managed to win 1 match throughout the duration of Pro League this past season. Definitely struggled. It seems like K-Kona has actually been kind of like a farm team for a lot of the other teams that are in the division, because you've seen players like Relics on that team, who's now on Selfless, and some other names that have come up through playing for K-Kona or playing for when it was Sapphire.com. They've had some of these names that have joined their roster, played through a season, and they've used it as kind of a stepping stone to get onto a better roster. However, right now, they're in kind of a worse for the wear kind of way right here. So I expect, honestly, I think the Pug Gods can take this one and find themselves up into Pro League. Are they going to be able to do it in Pro League? I think that they'll probably be in the bottom half of the teams. I think that they can definitely win some matches against like a weakened Complexity, CLG, who looked like they were in the dumpster this past season. They could probably, maybe squeak out a win against them. But I think that, they've definitely got an opportunity here to make it up to Pro League. So they should hold their heads high that they were able to do as well as they did at the LAN.
Last but not least, I've got a quick-fire question for you, Corey. So, quick as you can, give me your thoughts on this news story from the week. We have 2 new Brazilian teams moving to North America, Winout and G3X.
I feel like it's pretty appropriate that you're asking me, because I think most people know that I'm a big fan of Brazilian Counter-Strike, and I think that this is great. We're going to see a lot of familiar names coming up from Brazil on these rosters. I mean, Steel's new roster on G3X.
Yep.
You've also got Knack coming back. Bit's going to be there with them. Some of the old guys from MIBR. And I've heard big things about this win-out roster, especially this guy Yell, who I haven't specifically heard of, but all of the Brazilians that actually follow me on Twitter were just like, dude, this guy is insane. His op. And that's the thing is, like, we've got Fallen, incredible with an op, great in-game leader. We've got Henny, unbelievable opper, probably the fastest reactions you'll ever see when it comes to just hitting these flick shots, just absolutely nuts. I'm anxious to see what this guy brings to the table if they're hyping this guy up as much as they are. So I think that it's only going to do great things for the region. And hell, man, at some point we might actually see the top 4 North American teams not even be from North America unless the rest of NA can get off their asses and start performing, because that's really what it boils down to here. Is hopefully this is just a motivational kick in the ass for some of these teams to start practicing more, start getting their tactical prowess. We talked about that earlier in the show, and start being able to execute and do well in these tournaments. Otherwise, the Brazilians are going to come in and start taking all your prize money.
That's it for this week. I'm Jack Westerman, joined by Corey Megaman Gilbert.
We'll see you next week for one of our final episodes of PopFlash.